The Empire sensors detected nothing until the silence swallowed them. Fleet Admiral Kyrex Valthorn stood before the massive holographic display in the command center of the Domination-class Dreadnought Eternal Conquest, watching the scattered remains of what had once been the human colony of New Bangalore drift through space like metallic snow. The sight should have filled him with satisfaction. Another world cleansed, another step toward galactic unity under Kethvar rule. Instead, something felt wrong. "Sensor readings, Lieutenant Zara," Kyrex commanded, his 4 eyes focusing on the tactical display with predatory intensity. The Kethvar were apex predators from a high-gravity world, built for conquest and domination. For 3 centuries, their hegemonic empire had swept across the galaxy, bringing order to chaos and unity to division. Resistance was futile. It always had been. "Sir, scanning complete," replied Lieutenant Zara Nathis, her clawed fingers dancing across bioorganic control surfaces. "Orbital bombardment achieved total saturation. No life signs detected. Colony population of 2.3 million eliminated as ordered." Kyrex nodded, but the unease remained. The humans had put up token resistance, a few orbital defense platforms, some interceptor craft, but nothing substantial. Nothing like the desperate last stands they'd witnessed on other human worlds. For a species that had surprised the galaxy with their tenacity, New Bangalore had fallen far too easily. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Hex Vorlin from his station, "receiving priority transmission from High Command. The Terran homeworld of Earth has been located." The bridge fell silent. Earth, the mythical birth world of humanity that had evaded Imperial scouts for decades. Finding it would mean the end of human resistance once and for all. "Put it through," Kyrex ordered. The hologram shifted to display Grand Admiral Theron Kazrix, Supreme Commander of the Imperial Fleet. His scarred face bore the marks of 100 conquered worlds. "Admiral Valthorn, you are to proceed immediately to coordinates 847.2 by 394.7. Our deep space reconnaissance has finally located the human homeworld. Intelligence suggests minimal defenses. They appear to have concentrated their forces defending the outer colonies." Kyrex felt his hunting instincts sharpen. "How many vessels should I expect to encounter?" "Preliminary scans detect perhaps a dozen patrol craft, maybe some defense platforms. Nothing that should challenge your battle group. The humans have been running scared since we began our campaign. This should be their final defeat." The transmission ended, leaving Kyrex staring at the navigation coordinates. Something about this felt like a trap, but he couldn't identify what. The humans were clever, more so than most species the Empire had conquered, but they were also pragmatic. They knew when they were beaten. Helmsman Crix set course for the coordinates, signaled the fleet to prepare for hyperspace transition. Around the Eternal Conquest, 47 Imperial warships began moving into formation. It was overkill for a poorly defended homeworld, but Kyrex believed in overwhelming force. The Kethvar way was to strike hard and fast, leaving no possibility of resistance. As the fleet entered hyperspace, Senior Tactical Analyst Jorth Kellen approached the Admiral's command dais. Jorth was unusual among Kethvar, smaller, more cerebral, chosen for analysis rather than combat. "Admiral, I've been reviewing the human tactical data from our previous engagements. There's something inconsistent about their defensive strategies." Kyrex turned his attention to the analyst. "Explain." "Every human colony we've attacked has put up fierce resistance except the last 3. New Bangalore, New Moscow, and New Cairo all fell within hours. But the earlier battles, New Tokyo, New London, New Sydney, those lasted weeks. The humans fought for every street, every building. They used tactics we'd never seen before." "Your point?" "Either the humans have given up completely or..." Jorth hesitated. "Or what, analyst?" "Or they're drawing us somewhere specific. The pattern of easy victories corresponds directly with our approach vector toward their homeworld." Kyrex considered this. The Kethvar had conquered over 200 species in their march across the galaxy. Some had tried elaborate traps and ambushes. All had failed against superior Imperial firepower and tactics, but humans had proven unusually creative in their desperation. "Maintain current course," Kyrex decided, "but bring all ships to combat readiness upon emergence from hyperspace." 12 hours later, the Imperial fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of a ordinary-looking star system. 8 planets orbited a medium-sized yellow star. Long-range sensors immediately focused on the third planet, a blue-green world that matched the description of Earth from captured human databases. Initial scans confirm, reported Lieutenant Zara. Oxygen, nitrogen atmosphere, 70% water coverage, population centers detected. This is definitely the human homeworld. Kyrex studied the tactical display. Just as intelligence had predicted, the system appeared lightly defended. A few patrol craft moved in standard patterns around the outer planets. Some orbital defense platforms circled Earth itself. Nothing that could challenge even a single Imperial dreadnought, let alone a full battle fleet. "Sir," called sensor technician Vex Harlan, detecting anomalous readings from the fourth planet. "Specify." "It's empty. Mars. That's what the humans call it. Shows signs of extensive terraforming projects, but no current population. Massive industrial complexes, but they're powered down. It's like everyone just left." Kyrex felt the unease growing stronger. Could they have evacuated their population to Mars? "Negative, sir. The industrial facilities are too specialized. Shipbuilding, weapons manufacturing, advanced research. This was a military production center, not a refugee camp. And it's been abandoned for at least 6 months based on orbital decay patterns of debris and shutdown heat signatures." Something was definitely wrong. No species abandoned that level of infrastructure unless they were planning something. Kyrex had seen desperate civilizations try to buy time by staging false retreats, but this felt different. This felt planned. "Begin approach to Earth," he ordered. "All ships maintain combat formation. Charge all weapon systems." As the Imperial fleet moved deeper into the system, more inconsistencies appeared. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter showed signs of massive mining operations, but they too were abandoned. Long-range communications arrays that should have been screaming warnings to Earth were silent. Even the patrol craft seemed to be following automated patterns rather than responding to the invasion. "Admiral," reported Communications Officer Hext, "we're detecting a transmission from Earth. It's being broadcast on all frequencies. Put it through." The main display shifted to show a human male, perhaps 40 years old, sitting in what appeared to be a simple office. He wore no uniform, carried no obvious weapons, and spoke in a calm, measured tone that somehow made Kyrex's predatory instincts scream danger. "I am Dr. Marcus Holloway, Director of Earth Planetary Defense. You are Admiral Kyrex Valthorn of the Kethvar Imperial Fleet. We've been expecting you." The casual use of his name sent a chill through Kyrex. Human intelligence was better than they'd suspected. "I assume you're here to demand our surrender," the human continued. "Before you do, I'd like to make you aware of a few facts about your current situation." Kyrex almost smiled. Humans always tried to negotiate when cornered. "You are in no position to make demands, human. Surrender now and your deaths will be quick." "Actually, Admiral, I think we need to discuss your ship's sensor readings, or rather, what your sensors aren't detecting." Kyrex turned to his sensor officer. "Report." Lieutenant Zara checked her displays, then checked them again. Her expression grew confused. "Sir, I'm getting conflicting readings. Long-range sensors show the fleet in formation, but short-range sensors, they're showing gaps." "Gaps?" "Ships that were there a moment ago aren't showing up on proximity scans, but they're still responding to communications." The human on the screen smiled. Not the desperate grin of cornered prey, but something far more unsettling. "You see, Admiral, the problem with sensor technology is that it relies on detecting electromagnetic signatures, gravitational displacement, heat emissions, all the normal indicators of matter interacting with space-time." Kyrex felt ice forming in his veins. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that for the past hour, roughly half your fleet has been fighting a very different kind of battle. A battle against an enemy that your sensors literally cannot detect." The bridge erupted in activity as officers checked and rechecked their instruments. Kyrex himself turned to the tactical display, counting the ships in formation. 48 vessels had entered the system. The display showed 48 vessels in formation, but when he tried to hail specific ships, Conquest of Worlds respond. Silence. Inevitable victory, report status. Silence. Righteous vengeance? Acknowledge. Nothing. Sensor officer, I want a visual confirmation of fleet positions. Use optical scanners, not electromagnetic sensors. The main display switched to visual spectrum cameras. What they saw made several officers step back in shock. The Imperial fleet formation had gaps, dark spaces where massive dreadnoughts should have been. Ships that had been there minutes ago were simply gone, leaving no debris, no energy signatures, no trace they had ever existed. 24 vessels, sir, whispered Lieutenant Zara. We've lost half the fleet. The human on the screen continued his explanation as if discussing the weather. The fascinating thing about human engineering is that we've never been the strongest or the fastest or the most technologically advanced species. We've had to be clever, we've had to think differently. Kyrex found his voice. What did you do to my ships? Nothing dramatic, Admiral. We simply built weapons that your sensors can't detect because they don't interact with electromagnetic fields in conventional ways. Gravitational manipulation technology. Your ships didn't explode, they were compressed. Matter converted to energy so efficiently that it left no trace your instruments could recognize. The remaining Imperial ships began pulling into tighter formation, commanders finally realizing they were under attack from an invisible enemy. Kyrex could hear the panic in their communications as they tried to target threats their sensors couldn't find. Impossible, Kyrex growled. No species has mastered gravitational weapons. The energy requirements alone would be impossible, the human agreed, if you tried to generate gravitational fields from nothing. But what if you didn't generate them? What if you simply redirected existing gravitational forces? The sun you're currently orbiting puts out quite a lot of gravitational energy. Mars, despite being evacuated, contains enough industrial infrastructure to build some very large gravitational lenses. Understanding dawned on Kyrex like a falling star. The abandoned factories on Mars weren't abandoned at all. They were automated, building weapons that could focus stellar gravity into surgical instruments of destruction. Weapons that existed in a realm where conventional sensors couldn't detect them. You've been planning this for months, Kyrex realized. Years, the human corrected. We've been tracking your fleet's approach vector since you entered this galactic sector. Every battle you fought, every victory you achieved was carefully orchestrated to bring you exactly here, exactly now, when Mars was in optimal position to use our sun's gravitational field as a weapon. More Imperial ships winked out of existence. The survivors were firing wildly at empty space, their weapons striking nothing while invisible forces tore their vessels apart at the molecular level. The colonies, Kyrex whispered. New Bangalore, New Moscow, New Cairo. You sacrificed millions of your own people just to lure us here. The human's expression hardened. We evacuated every human from those colonies 6 months ago. What you destroyed were automated cities, holographic populations, and a very elaborate theater designed to make you think you were winning. Kyrex felt something he had never experienced in decades of conquest. Complete, helpless terror. His flagship was surrounded by invisible weapons that could destroy it without warning. His fleet was being systematically eliminated by an enemy his sensors couldn't even detect. What do you want? He asked. What we've always wanted, Admiral, to be left alone. The Kethvar Empire can continue conquering the galaxy, but you'll do it without touching human worlds. Because now, you know what happens when you threaten Earth. And if we refuse? The human touched a control on his desk. Kyrex's sensors detected a massive gravitational distortion forming around his flagship. Not strong enough to destroy the ship, but powerful enough to demonstrate the weapon's capabilities. The Eternal Conquest groaned as artificial gravity fields twisted its hull in directions that physics shouldn't allow. Admiral, Dr. Holloway said quietly, you have 7 ships left out of 48. Your weapons can't target our gravitational lenses because they exist in dimensions your sensors can't access. Your armor can't protect you from weapons that attack the fundamental forces holding your atoms together. You have 2 options, retreat and never return, or join the 24 vessels that have already been converted to their component energy. Kyrex looked around his bridge at officers who were trained to conquer worlds, now paralyzed by an enemy they couldn't see or comprehend. The Kethvar way was to fight until death, but this wasn't a fight. This was execution, delayed only by human mercy. "All ships," he commanded through gritted teeth, "prepare to withdraw." "Admiral," Dr. Holloway added, "please carry a message back to your high command. Humanity is willing to coexist peacefully with the Kethvar Empire. We have no territorial ambitions beyond our current borders. But if you force us to defend ourselves again, next time we won't stop at destroying your fleet. We'll follow you home." The transmission ended, leaving Kyrek staring at empty space where his ship should have been. Around him, the surviving crew worked frantically to calculate hyperspace jump coordinates that would take them as far from Earth as possible. As the Eternal Conquest and its 6 remaining escorts jumped to hyperspace, they left behind a solar system that looked exactly as it had when they arrived. No debris, no energy signatures, no indication that the most powerful fleet in Kethvar history had just been quietly erased from existence. But the story was far from over. Chapter 2. The Weight of Silence. Dr. Marcus Holloway stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching Earth turn slowly beneath him. The blue-green marble looked peaceful, serene even, giving no hint of the invisible weapons network that now protected it. For 3 years, he had carried the weight of humanity's greatest secret, and today, that weight felt heavier than ever. "The Kethvar fleet has cleared the system," reported Director Sarah Chen as she approached from the command center. "All gravitational lenses are powering down to standby mode." Marcus nodded but didn't turn from the window. "Casualty report?" "0 human losses. Admiral Valthorn's fleet never got close enough to engage our conventional defenses." "I meant the Kethvar casualties." Sarah paused. They both knew the numbers. 24 massive warships, each carrying between 5 and 8,000 crew members. Somewhere between 120,000 and 200,000 sentient beings had died in the past hour, compressed into energy so efficiently that their atoms no longer existed in recognizable form. "The gravitational compression was instantaneous," Sarah said quietly. "They wouldn't have felt anything. That doesn't make them less dead." Marcus had spent 5 years designing the weapons that had just saved Earth, but he'd never stopped thinking about what those weapons actually did. Each gravitational lens was a masterpiece of physics and engineering, capable of focusing stellar gravity with surgical precision. They could compress a dreadnought to the size of a marble in milliseconds, converting matter to energy according to Einstein's most famous equation. They were also the most terrifying weapons humanity had ever created. "Director Holloway," came a voice from behind them. Marcus turned to see Captain Elena Vasquez, commanding officer of the stealth reconnaissance ship Shadow's Edge. She looked exhausted, her dark hair pulled back severely, her uniform bearing the subtle stains of weeks in deep space. "Captain, I thought your ship was still in the outer system." "We docked 20 minutes ago. I have intelligence that changes everything about this victory." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Explain." "The Kethvar weren't just probing our defenses. They were testing a new type of sensor array, something called quantum resonance detection. If they'd had another week to analyze our gravitational signatures, they would have seen the lenses," Marcus finished. "Worse, they would have been able to map our entire defensive network. Every installation on Mars, every hidden facility in the asteroid belt, every gravitational manipulation device we've built over the past decade." Sarah stepped forward. "How do you know this?" Captain Vasquez reached into her jacket and produced a small data crystal. "Because I've been inside their command structure for the past 6 months. Admiral Valthorn wasn't the real threat. He was a distraction while their science division worked on countermeasures." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. For months, they'd been celebrating their invisible advantage over alien technology, never suspecting that the aliens were working on ways to see through the invisibility. "Captain," he said carefully, "are you telling me you've been operating undercover within the Kethvar Empire?" "Not just me. We have 17 deep cover agents placed throughout their military hierarchy. The Kethvar think they're dealing with a primitive species that got lucky. They have no idea that human intelligence has been watching their every move for years." Marcus looked back at Earth, thinking of the billions of people who had no idea how close they come to discovery. The gravitational defense network was humanity's greatest achievement, but it was also their greatest vulnerability. If the Kethvar learned to detect gravitational manipulation, "What's our timeline?" he asked. Based on their research progress, 6 months before they deploy quantum resonance sensors fleet-wide. Maybe less if they prioritize the project after today's losses. Then we need to accelerate Project Silence. Sarah's eyes widened. Marcus, Project Silence isn't ready. The power requirements alone will have to be solved, Marcus interrupted, because the alternative is losing our only advantage against an empire that's conquered half the galaxy. Project Silence was the theoretical next step in gravitational warfare. Weapons that could manipulate space-time itself, creating zones where the normal laws of physics simply didn't apply. Instead of compressing matter, they would make it temporarily stop existing, creating perfect voids that even quantum sensors couldn't detect. But the energy requirements were staggering. Each silence weapon would need to tap directly into a star's core, channeling stellar fusion energy through dimensional folding technology that barely existed even in theory. I'll need every physicist, every engineer, every theoretical mathematician we have, Marcus said, and I'll need them yesterday. Chapter 3. The Science of Impossibility. Dr. Akira Tanaka had spent 15 years studying the fundamental forces of the universe, and he was absolutely certain that what Marcus Holloway was asking him to do was impossible. You want to create weapons that delete space itself? Akira asked, staring at the holographic equations floating above the conference table in Earth's most secure research facility. Not just compress matter or manipulate gravity, but actually remove sections of reality from existence. Temporarily, Marcus clarified. The space-time would snap back into normal configuration once the weapon powered down. That's not how dimensional physics works. You can't just borrow pieces of reality and expect to return them unchanged. Around the table, 12 of humanity's greatest scientific minds were having similar arguments. Dr. Rebecca Torres, the leading expert in exotic matter physics, was shaking her head at power consumption calculations. Dr. James Wright, who had designed the original gravitational lenses, was questioning whether human technology could even interface with stellar-level energy sources. Marcus let them argue for several minutes before calling for silence. I know it sounds impossible, he said. 5 years ago, invisible gravitational weapons sounded impossible too. 3 years ago, most of you told me that focusing stellar gravity was a theoretical fantasy. 6 months ago, half of you insisted that the Kethvar could never develop quantum sensors. He gestured to Captain Vasquez, who had been sitting quietly in the corner. Captain, please share what your intelligence network has discovered about Kethvar expansion plans. Vasquez stood and activated a star map showing the local Galactic sector. Red zones indicated Kethvar-controlled space, slowly expanding outward like a cancer. Based on intercepted communications, the Empire plans to control this entire spiral arm within the next century, she said. They've identified 47 species as potential threats, including 12 that they consider dangerous enough to require complete extermination. She highlighted a small cluster of stars near the edge of the map. Humanity is number 3 on that list. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Kethvar weren't just another aggressive alien species, they were conducting systematic genocide on a galactic scale. The Gravitational Defense Network bought us time, Marcus continued. But time for what? To hide behind invisible weapons while they conquer everyone else? To wait until they develop sensors that can see through our defenses? Dr. Tanaka raised his hand. Even if we could build Project Silence weapons, what's to stop them from developing countermeasures against those too? Because, Marcus said, pulling up a new set of equations, silence weapons don't just hide from sensors. They hide from reality itself. You can't detect something that doesn't exist, even temporarily. The power requirements, Dr. Torres began, can be met by tapping stellar cores directly. We've already proven that gravitational manipulation can channel stellar energy. Silence weapons would just use more of it. The risk of destabilizing our own sun, Dr. Wright protested, is less than the certainty of extinction if we do nothing. Marcus looked around the table at faces that were slowly shifting from skepticism to grim determination. These were people who had already achieved the impossible once. They were beginning to realize they would have to do it again. How long do we have? Asked Dr. Tanaka. 6 months until the Kethvar deploy quantum sensors. 18 months until their next major fleet movement towards human space. And how long will Project Silence take to complete? Marcus met his gaze steadily. 12 months if we're lucky, 15 if we're realistic, 24 if we encounter unexpected problems. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. They were racing against time, betting humanity's survival on technology that existed only in theory. I'll need access to the solar collection arrays, Dr. Torres said finally. And direct interface with the Mars manufacturing facilities, added Dr. Wright. Plus unlimited computational resources for modeling dimensional physics, Dr. Tanaka concluded. Marcus nodded. Done. All of it. Whatever you need. As the scientists began discussing technical details, Captain Vasquez approached Marcus privately. There's something else, she said quietly. The Kethvar aren't the only ones watching humanity. Our deep cover agents have detected scouts from at least 3 other major galactic powers. Word is spreading about what happened to Admiral Valthorn's fleet. Good word or bad word? Both. Some species are terrified that humans have developed invisible weapons. Others are trying to figure out how to steal the technology for themselves. Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of responsibility settling even heavier on his shoulders. Humanity had wanted to be left alone, but their display of advanced weapons had made them the center of galactic attention. How many species are we talking about? Confirmed intelligence on 7 different civilizations currently studying human capabilities. Probable surveillance from at least 12 more. The implications were staggering. Humanity had tried to solve their problem with the Kethvar Empire by demonstrating superior technology. Instead, they had painted a target on themselves for every ambitious species in the galaxy. We need to accelerate everything, Marcus decided. Project Silence, intelligence operations, defensive preparations. Because in 6 months, we won't just be hiding from the Kethvar. We'll be hiding from everyone. Chapter 4. The Gathering Storm. Admiral Kyrex Valthorn stood in the detention center of the Imperial Fortress world Kethvar Prime, staring through reinforced barriers at the creature that had destroyed his career. The being called itself a human, though it looked deceptively fragile compared to the predatory Kethvar physiology. Commander Zara Holloway, Kyrex read from the prisoner file, captured during a reconnaissance mission in the Centauri sector. Sister to Dr. Marcus Holloway, the architect of humanity's gravitational weapons. The prisoner looked up from the simple meal she was eating. Despite weeks of interrogation, her eyes held no fear, no desperation, only a calm intelligence that reminded Kyrex uncomfortably of her brother's demeanor during their confrontation at Earth. Actually, it's Dr. Zara Holloway, she corrected. I have 3 doctorates in xenobiology, quantum mechanics, and interstellar law. The military commander thing is just a side job. So, you were piloting a stealth reconnaissance vessel in Imperial space. I was conducting a biological survey of your colonial systems. Did you know that Kethvar terraforming techniques are actually damaging the ecosystems you're trying to create? Your atmospheric processors are introducing chemical combinations that will make most of your new worlds uninhabitable within 50 years. Kyrex felt his familiar frustration building. Humans always did this. Turn conversations in unexpected directions, forcing their captors to think about things they'd rather ignore. You were spying on Imperial military installations. I was documenting the environmental impact of your expansion, though I did notice some interesting things about your fleet deployments. Despite himself, Kyrex was curious. Human intelligence capabilities had proven far superior to Imperial estimates. Such as, you're not actually expanding randomly. Your conquest pattern follows specific stellar cartography. You're searching for something. Stars with particular spectral signatures, planets with specific mineral compositions. You're looking for the materials needed to build something very large and very energy intensive. Kyrex's blood ran cold. Imperial strategic objectives were classified at the highest levels. This human prisoner shouldn't have been able to deduce anything about long-term Imperial plans from simple fleet observations. Furthermore, Zara continued, the timing of your expansion suggests you're working against a deadline. Something is forcing you to conquer and build as quickly as possible, even though rapid expansion leaves your supply lines vulnerable. How could you possibly know that? Because human intelligence has been tracking Kethvar movements for years. We know about the deep space monitoring stations you've built beyond the galactic rim. We know about the quantum resonance experiments, and we know what you're really afraid of. Kyrex found himself leaning forward despite his better judgment. Enlighten me. The Void Shepherds, the ancient entities that consume entire galaxies. Your expansion isn't conquest for its own sake. It's preparation for war against something that makes your empire look like insects. The words hit Kyrex like a physical blow. The Void Shepherds were the Empire's most closely guarded secret, known only to the highest levels of command. The ancient threat that had driven Kethvar expansion for centuries, the nightmare that lurked beyond the galaxy's edge. Impossible. You can't know about the Shepherds. Human deep space telescopes detected the first signs 2 years ago. Entire star systems at the galactic rim going dark in patterns that match historical records from other galaxies. The Shepherds are coming, and you're trying to build defenses before they arrive. Zara stood up, her calm demeanor never wavering. The question, Admiral, is whether you want to keep fighting humanity while the real threat approaches, or whether you like to discuss cooperation. Cooperation. Human gravitational weapons technology could give the Kethvar Empire a significant advantage against entities that exist partially outside normal spacetime. In exchange, Imperial manufacturing capacity could help us build defenses on a galactic scale. Kyrex stared at this small, fragile creature who was calmly proposing an alliance between species that had been trying to destroy each other hours ago. And why would humanity risk trusting the Empire? Because, Zara said simply, the Void Shepherds don't distinguish between predators and prey. When they arrive, every species in this galaxy will either fight together or die separately. Chapter 5. The Price of Silence. On Mars, in the deepest levels of the automated manufacturing complex, machines work tirelessly to build humanity's next generation of impossible weapons. The Silence prototypes were taking shape. Devices that would make the gravitational lenses look like primitive tools by comparison. Dr. Marcus Holloway walked through the construction bays, watching robotic systems assemble components that defied conventional physics. Each Silence weapon was the size of a small building, containing dimensional folding technology that allowed them to channel stellar energy directly from the sun's core. Power coupling efficiency is at 93%, reported Chief Engineer Lisa Park, consulting her tablet as they walked. We should be ready for the first live test within the week. And the stellar stability analysis. Dr. Wright's calculations show minimal risk to solar output. The energy drain will be equivalent to about 6 hours of normal solar activity, spread across several microseconds. Marcus nodded, but privately he wondered if they truly understood what they were building. The equations worked in theory, but they were manipulating forces that could potentially unravel the fabric of space-time itself. "Sir," called technician Alex Rodriguez from a nearby workstation. "Receiving priority communication from Earth Command. It's Director Chen, marked urgent." Marcus activated the communication array, and Sarah Chen's hologram materialized beside him. "Marcus, we have a problem. Captain Vasquez's intelligence network has detected massive Kethvar fleet movements throughout their territory. They're not just preparing to attack us. They're consolidating their entire military for something much larger." "Larger how?" 47 battle fleets converging on a staging area near the galactic rim. Over 2,000 capital ships plus support vessels. It's the largest fleet movement in recorded galactic history. Marcus felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. They're not planning to invade human space. No. Intelligence suggests they're preparing for war against something else entirely. Something that's got them scared enough to recall fleets from active conquest zones. "The Void Shepherds," Marcus whispered. "How did you—" "It's the only thing that makes sense. The Kethvar haven't been randomly conquering the galaxy. They've been building an empire strong enough to fight entities that exist beyond normal space-time." The implications were staggering. If the Kethvar Empire, the most militarily powerful civilization in known space, was terrified enough to halt their expansion and gather their entire fleet, then humanity faced a threat that made their previous conflicts look like minor disagreements. "There's more," Sarah continued. "We've detected similar fleet movements from several other major galactic powers. The Zarin Collective, the Astral Concordance, even the isolated quantum monks are mobilizing. A galactic alliance? More like desperate species trying to survive something that's already destroyed the Andromeda Galaxy. Marcus looked around at the silence weapons under construction, wondering if they were building tools of war or instruments of survival. Either way, humanity was about to discover that their desire to be left alone was about to become impossible. The galaxy was preparing for war, and silence was no longer an option. Chapter 6. The Alliance of Silence. 3 months later, Grand Admiral Theron Kashrik stood in the War Council chambers of Kethvar Prime, facing the most difficult decision of his military career. The holographic display showed real-time intelligence from across the galaxy. Ancient monitoring stations going dark, entire star systems flickering out of existence, and something vast moving through the void between galaxies. "The Void Shepherds have begun their approach," announced Intelligence Director Vex Mordain, her scarred features grim with the weight of terrible knowledge. Deep space sensors detect massive gravitational distortions approximately 50,000 light-years beyond the galactic rim. At current velocity, they will reach the outer colonies within 18 months. "Report," Kasrix ordered. 47 battle fleets now assembled at Staging Area Omega, replied Fleet Marshal Korax Fren. 2,300 capital ships, 8,000 support vessels, and the entire 1st Legion ground forces. The largest military concentration in Imperial history. Will it be enough? The question hung in the air like poison. Every officer present knew the answer, but none wanted to speak it aloud. "Sir," said a voice from the chamber's communication array. "Priority transmission from the human sector. It's Admiral Valthorn requesting immediate audience with the War Council." Kasrix felt his predatory instinct sharpen. Kyrex Valthorn had been branded a failure after his defeat at Earth, stripped of his fleet command and assigned to prisoner interrogation duties. Why would he be contacting the Council now? "Put him through." The hologram materialized, showing Valthorn standing beside a human prisoner, a female with calm, intelligent eyes that reminded Kasrix uncomfortably of the doctor who had humiliated the Imperial fleet. "Grand Admiral," Valthorn began, "I present Dr. Zara Holloway, human xenobiologist and intelligence operative. She has information critical to our survival against the Void Shepherds." Kasrix felt several officers reach for their weapons, but he held up a restraining claw. "Explain." The human stepped forward with no trace of fear. "Grand Admiral, my species has been monitoring the approach of the Void Shepherds for 2 years. We've analyzed their attack patterns from 17 destroyed galaxies, and we know why conventional military forces can't defeat them. Enlighten us." The Shepherds exist partially outside normal space-time. They can manipulate reality itself, making physical attacks ineffective. Kinetic weapons pass through them. Energy weapons are absorbed and redirected. Even nuclear strikes barely register as inconveniences. Fleet Marshal Vren snarled with contempt. "And what makes you think your species knows better than the Kethvar Empire how to fight such entities?" "Because," Zara said calmly, "humanity has already developed weapons that manipulate space-time itself. Our gravitational technology is specifically designed to affect targets that exist beyond normal physics." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The humans hadn't just defeated Admiral Valthorn's fleet, they had built weapons that could potentially harm the Shepherds. "What do you propose?" Kasrix asked carefully. "An alliance. Kethvar manufacturing capacity combined with human gravitational technology. Together, we can build weapons that might actually have a chance against entities that eat galaxies. And in return, humanity gets to survive, along with everyone else in this galaxy." Intelligence Director Mordain leaned forward. "How do we know this isn't an elaborate trap? Humans have already demonstrated superior deception capabilities." "Because," Zara replied, "if the Shepherds aren't stopped, it won't matter who wins the smaller conflicts. Dead civilizations don't get to enjoy their victories." Kasrix studied this small, fragile creature who was proposing to save the galaxy. Human psychology was difficult to read, but he detected no deception in her manner, only the desperate pragmatism of a species facing extinction. Admiral Valthorn, what is your assessment of human capabilities? Sir, based on my interrogation of Dr. Holloway and analysis of their gravitational weapons, I believe human technology represents our best chance against entities that exist partially outside normal space-time. Their weapons affect fundamental forces rather than just matter and energy. The War Council exchanged glances. Accepting human partnership would mean admitting that the Empire needed help from a species they had planned to conquer. But the alternative was facing the Shepherds with conventional weapons that had failed in 17 other galaxies. Dr. Holloway, Castrick said finally, assuming we accept this alliance, what would you need from the Empire? Access to your manufacturing facilities, particularly the massive construction yards in the Omega sector. Human gravitational technology requires components built to tolerances that only Imperial industry can achieve at scale. And what would humanity provide? Complete specifications for silence weapons, devices that can temporarily delete sections of space-time itself, plus tactical intelligence on Shepard capabilities gathered from deep space observations. Fleet Marshal Vren looked skeptical. Weapons that delete space-time? That sounds like theoretical fantasy. So did invisible gravitational weapons, Zara pointed out, until they destroyed half your fleet. Chapter 7, Convergence. Dr. Marcus Holloway materialized in the Kethvar Imperial shipyards as a hologram. His image transmitted across thousands of light years through quantum entanglement communication. Around him, the largest construction facility in known space hummed with activity as human and Kethvar engineers worked together to build weapons that existed at the very edge of possible physics. Status report, Marcus said to the mixed crowd of alien and human faces gathered around the construction bay. First-generation silence weapons are complete, reported Imperial Chief Engineer Korth Nexian. A massive Kethvar with cybernetic implants that allowed direct interface with manufacturing systems. 10 prototype units ready for field testing. Power coupling efficiency? 97%. Your dimensional folding technology interfaces perfectly with our industrial energy networks. Marcus nodded, watching robotic systems install the final components and weapons that could make sections of reality temporarily stop existing. Each silence device was the size of a small building, containing gravitational lenses that focus stellar energy through dimensional gates that barely existed in normal space-time. Dr. Holloway, called Captain Elena Vasquez from her monitoring station, receiving deep space telemetry from our advanced scouts. The Shepherds have accelerated their approach vector. How much time do we have? 8 months, maybe less. And sir, the scale is beyond anything we imagined. Marcus activated the main display, showing long-range sensor data from the galactic rim. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Void Shepherds weren't individual entities. They were a swarm. Thousands of impossibly large constructs moving through space like a plague of living geometry, each one the size of a solar system. Confirmed contact with 17 different Shepard-class entities, Vasquez continued. Energy signatures suggest they're consuming space-time itself as they travel, leaving zones of pure vacuum where reality no longer functions normally. Imperial Admiral Kyrex Valthorn, now serving as liaison between human and Kethvar forces, studied the tactical display with predatory calculation. Our combined fleets can't engage that many targets simultaneously. We don't need to engage them all, Marcus replied. Intelligence analysis suggests the Shepherds operate as a hive consciousness. Destroy the primary control entities, and the rest become dormant. How do we identify the control entities? By their size. The largest Shepherds are the ones directing the swarm. The display zoomed in on the center of the approaching threat, revealing constructs so massive they defied comprehension. The largest was easily the size of Jupiter, its surface crawling with geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Those are our primary targets, Marcus said. Silence weapons are designed to create temporary voids in space-time. If we can delete enough of a Shepard's mass energy matrix, it should collapse into dimensional instability. Should? Asked Admiral Valthorn. The physics are theoretical beyond a certain point. We're building weapons to fight enemies that shouldn't be able to exist according to normal science. Chief Engineer Nexian rumbled with what might have been approval. The best weapons are always theoretical until someone uses them successfully. Around the construction bay, human and Kethvar technicians continued their work, building devices that represented the combined knowledge of two species facing extinction. The alliance between humanity and the Empire had developed with surprising speed, driven by the pragmatic recognition that survival required cooperation. Dr. Holloway called Dr. Sarah Chen from Earth, her hologram appearing beside Marcus. We've completed analysis of the Shepard energy signatures. There's something you need to know. Report. The Shepards aren't just consuming matter and energy. They're harvesting consciousness itself. Every sentient being in the 17 galaxies they've destroyed, their minds are still active inside the Shepard constructs. The revelation hit everyone present like a physical blow. Billions of civilizations, trillions of individual consciousness, all trapped inside the entities that had consumed their worlds. Are you saying the Shepards are powered by enslaved minds? Asked Admiral Valthorn. Worse, the minds aren't enslaved, they're integrated. Every consciousness that gets absorbed becomes part of the Shepard Hive intelligence. They're not just consuming galaxies, they're collecting the knowledge and experience of every species they encounter. Marcus felt pieces of a cosmic horror clicking into place. That's how they've become so effective. Each galaxy they consume makes them smarter, more adaptable. They're not just predators, they're an accumulating intelligence that grows stronger with every victory. Can the absorbed consciousness be freed? Asked Chief Engineer Nexian. Theoretically, yes. If we could disrupt the dimensional matrices that bind them to the Shepard constructs. The silence weapons, Marcus realized. They don't just delete matter, they could sever the dimensional connections holding the absorbed minds. The tactical implications were staggering. The weapons they were building to defend the galaxy might also be able to liberate the consciousness of 17 destroyed civilizations. How many minds are we talking about? Asked Captain Vasquez. Dr. Chen consulted her data displays. Conservative estimate based on galactic population averages. Approximately 4 trillion sentient beings. The construction bay fell silent as everyone present contemplated the scale of what they were attempting. They weren't just fighting to save their own galaxy, they were trying to free the accumulated consciousness of countless other worlds. Change priorities, Marcus announced. We're not just building weapons to destroy the Shepards. We're building liberation devices to free every mind they've absorbed. Can the silence weapons handle that kind of dimensional disruption? Asked Admiral Valthorn. We're about to find out. Because in 8 months, we're either going to free the largest prison in the universe, or become part of it ourselves. Chapter 8. The Final Silence. The combined fleet of humanity and the Kethvar Empire hung in space at the galaxy's edge, facing an enemy that defied every law of physics and reason. 3,000 ships from dozens of species, armed with weapons that existed at the very limits of possible science, prepared for the most important battle in galactic history. Dr. Marcus Holloway stood on the bridge of the hybrid command vessel Unity, watching sensor displays that showed the approaching Void Shepards in all their terrible glory. Each construct was a nightmare of living geometry, reality-warping entities that consumed space-time itself as they moved through the cosmos. All silence weapons report ready, announced Fleet Coordinator Zara Holloway, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what they were attempting. Dimensional targeting locks established on the 17 primary Shepard constructs. Power levels? 112% of optimal. We're channeling energy directly from 3 different stellar cores simultaneously. Admiral Kyrex Valthorn, now serving as Joint Tactical Commander, studied the enemy formation with predatory focus. The Shepards are maintaining their approach vector. They either don't recognize us as a threat, or they're confident they can absorb whatever we throw at them. They've probably faced gravitational weapons before, Marcus replied, but they've never encountered anything that can delete sections of reality itself. On the main display, the largest Shepard construct, designated Omega Prime, filled the center of the tactical view. It was easily the size of Jupiter, its surface crawling with patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human perception could process. According to their analysis, this entity contained the consciousness of nearly 500 billion absorbed minds. Confirmed energy signatures from all Shepard constructs, reported sensor technician Lee Park. They're beginning active reality manipulation in local space-time. Gravitational constants are fluctuating, and several of our outlying ships are reporting temporal distortions. Marcus felt the familiar weight of impossible decisions. The silence weapons were untested against targets this large, powered by physics that barely functioned in normal space-time. They were betting the survival of the galaxy on technology that existed purely in theory. Dr. Holloway called Captain Elena Vasquez from her intelligence station, receiving transmissions from inside the Shepard constructs. The absorbed consciousness are trying to communicate. Put it through. The bridge speakers filled with a cacophony of voices, thousands of different languages, millions of individual minds all trying to speak at once. But gradually, patterns emerged from the chaos. Words that had been translated and retranslated through countless species until they became universally recognizable. Help us remember ourselves. Trapped. So long, please. The voices belonged to civilizations that had been consumed centuries ago, their individual consciousness trapped within the Shepard constructs, but somehow still aware. Still hoping for freedom after unimaginable eons of imprisonment. Marcus felt the weight of 4 trillion lives pressing down on his shoulders. All ships, prepare for synchronized silence weapon discharge. Target the dimensional anchor points we've identified in each Shepard construct. Sir, Admiral Valthorn interjected, if we're wrong about the physics, if the silence weapons cause a cascade failure in local space-time, then we'll die quickly instead of being absorbed slowly, Marcus finished. Either way, this ends today. The Shepards had closed to within optimal firing range, their reality-warping presence causing visible distortions in the fabric of space around the Allied fleet. Several smaller vessels were already showing signs of temporal displacement, their crews aging years in minutes as causality itself became unstable. Silence weapons charged to maximum output, reported Zara. Dimensional targeting locks confirmed on all primary constructs. Marcus took a deep breath, thinking of Earth spinning peacefully in its distant solar system, unaware that its fate was about to be decided by weapons that barely existed in the same reality as the people they were meant to protect. All ships, he commanded, fire. The silence weapons discharged simultaneously, creating effects that human language had no words to describe. Sections of space-time simply ceased to exist, leaving perfect voids where reality itself had been temporarily deleted. The beam struck the Shepard constructs like surgical knives, cutting through the dimensional matrices that held absorbed consciousness in bondage. For a moment that lasted eternity, the universe held its breath. Then Omega Prime began to collapse. The massive construct, larger than worlds, started folding in on itself as the dimensional anchors holding its structure together were severed. But instead of exploding or disintegrating, something far more beautiful happened. Streams of light began pouring out of the collapsing Shepard. Not photons, but pure consciousness finally freed from its prison. Millions of individual minds representing hundreds of different species from the destroyed Andromeda galaxy, dispersed into space like luminous seeds seeking new soil in which to grow. "It's working," whispered Zara. "The absorbed consciousness are being liberated." Across the battlefield, all 17 primary Shepard constructs were suffering the same fate. Centuries of accumulated intelligence and experience, forcibly harvested from entire civilizations, were being returned to the cosmos as free entities. But the Shepards were not defenseless. The remaining constructs, smaller but still massive beyond comprehension, began to adapt their reality-warping abilities to counter the silence weapons. Space-time itself became a weapon as they twisted the fundamental forces of physics, trying to prevent further liberation of their absorbed consciousness. "Secondary wave incoming," reported Sensor Technician Park. "The Shepards are using gravitational manipulation to—" Her words were cut off, as the Unity was caught in a localized time distortion. Marcus watched in horror as half his bridge crew aged decades in seconds, while the other half moved in slow motion, trapped in temporal fields that made normal communication impossible. "Emergency protocols," he managed to say through the temporal interference. "All ships scatter and maintain silence weapon fire." The battle became a nightmare of impossible physics as reality itself became the battlefield. Ships found themselves fighting enemies that existed in 17 different dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that should have been effective passed harmlessly through targets that phased in and out of normal space-time. But humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology. It had been their ability to adapt, to find solutions that other species considered impossible. Dr. Holloway, came Captain Vasquez's voice through the temporal distortions. The liberated consciousness aren't just dispersing, they're organizing. Marcus looked at the tactical display and felt hope kindle in his chest. The freed minds from the destroyed galaxies were forming coordinated groups, using their collective knowledge to assist the Allied fleet. Civilizations that had been consumed centuries ago were now sharing their experience of Shepard tactics, providing real-time intelligence about enemy capabilities. They're teaching us how to fight, Marcus realized. The absorbed consciousness know the Shepard's weaknesses because they've been part of them. The tide of battle began to turn as the Allied fleet, guided by the liberated minds of 17 galaxies, adapted their tactics to exploit vulnerabilities that no living civilization had ever discovered. The Shepards, for the first time in their existence, found themselves facing enemies who understood their nature better than they understood themselves. One by one, the remaining constructs began to collapse as their dimensional matrices were severed. Trillions of liberated consciousness filled local spacetime with a light that existed beyond the visible spectrum. The radiance of minds finally free after eons of imprisonment. When the last Shepard construct dissolved into harmless energy, the galaxy fell silent, except for a sound that no species had ever heard before. The grateful whispers of 4 trillion voices saying thank you in languages that span the history of 2 entire galaxies.